This video will discuss week 6, clauses. We're starting to wrap things up and combine everything we learned into clauses, or into how these phrases make up clauses, and then how clauses make up sentences. So make sure you read the overview, rather short this week, but also there is the supplemental grammar information. I have also tossed in this week in clauses, the discussion of independent clauses, dependent clauses, sentence patterns, but I've also thrown in some things that really didn't fit elsewhere, like interjections, vocatives. In your textbook, they talk about cleft constructions, it constructions, here, there constructions. Make sure you read those, what clefts. So those are important to clauses because their clauses can be made up of these different, they're sort of odd constructions. They're not traditional clauses, but we do use these kind of constructions in English. So read through those because some of that might apply to the exercises for the week. So this week you have two files again, so the exercises and then the clauses. So if you click on the exercises, it downloads to a Word file as usual. So in this week, there's exercises from chapter 10, 11, and 12 in your textbook. So in number 1 here, it says classify the following according to clause type and what kind of speech act they would most likely be used to perform. For this, go back and think about verb mood. So imperative, declarative, interrogative, and then speech acts would be, for the first one, I'll give you the first one. Please turn the light on. That's an imperative, right? It's a demand. So the speech act is a request, or not really a request, it's a demand. So that's all you need to put for these, all right? Right? What kind of clause type it is, whether it's declarative, imperative, interrogative. A closed interrogative is a closed question. In other words, it's a question, but it's phrased as a statement. And then what speech act it would be likely to perform, okay? Then number 2, we've done this before too, explain how the following non-standard constructions differ. Again, the asterisk means ungrammatical. The little exclamation point there means that it's grammatical only in a non-standard dialect. So the ungrammatical means it's ungrammatical everywhere, but the last 4 could be grammatical in certain dialects. If you need to know what any of these notations are, they are on page 38 of your textbook. It tells you in a little box that says notational conventions, and it will tell you what the asterisk means, the little exclamation point, the percentage sign, and so on. Okay, so if you see any of those, you can find those on page 38. The third one here is compose an original example to illustrate each of the following. So this is just working. So in number 1, we gave you a sentence and you have to tell them what it is. This is working backwards. It's giving you a closed question and a typical natural response that is not an answer. So you're just working backwards from that, and you're going to create your own sentence or sentences. Chapter 11, the number 4 is about the word if. If can be both a subordinating conjunction and a preposition. So all of these sentences have underlined if phrases or clauses. You have to determine if the if construction here is a prepositional phrase or if it's a subordinating clause. Okay, which is a content clause. That's just what it means, a subordinating clause. Say what the answer is and then explain why you think that it is so. Basically, remember your definitions of a prepositional phrase, remember your definition of a subordinating clause, and tell me why it fits one of those definitions in each of these sentences. Okay, the number 5, it talks about embedded questions and why this term might be misleading. Present examples as necessary. This is your thoughts on knowing all you do about types of clauses, what embedded, like what is the definition of an embedded question, and why that might be misleading, and knowing what you know about interrogatives and so on. Just give me what you think. Okay. Number 6 is from chapter 12. You are going to look at these sentences and determine if they have a relative clause or a content clause, in other words, a subordinating clause. And underline those that are relative, and for each of them identify the antecedent. So, and the function of the relativized element. So remember, a relative pronoun, those are who, which, and that, and all forms of who. So if what you're looking for in these sentences are who, which, and that, and then determine whether that who, which, and that is functioning as if there's a clause. So remember your definition of a clause. It's got a subject and a verb. All right. And then determine if it's a relative clause, or if it's just a subordinating clause, or maybe there's not either. Because remember, relative pronouns don't have to be functioning as the head of clauses. They can be functioning as just a simple pronoun. So if there's nothing in the sentence, just leave it blank. Okay. And then if it is functioning as a relative clause, what is its antecedent? In other words, what noun phrase is it substituting for? Okay. And whether the relativized element, the function, is it the subject of the clause or is it the object of the clause? So if I have something like the guy that I met yesterday, that I met yesterday is a relative clause. The that in that clause is functioning as an object because there is a subject already of that clause, and it's I. That I met. I met is a subject verb. That is that means that the relative pronoun is the object. But if I said the guy who met me yesterday, in that case, who is the relative pronoun. It is the subject of the clause because it's the verb is met. Who met me, right? So that's what I mean in those sentences. In number 7, the following examples are presented without the usual internal punctuation. So this is, your book calls them integrated and supplementary. This is restricted and unrestricted relative clauses. So remember, in unrestricted clauses, there's usually commas around it. In these sentences, we left the commas out so that it's not quite as easy to tell. So you just have to tell me whether they are restricted or unrestricted relative clauses. All right. Then in 8, combine the clauses. Oh, so this is a revision. So it's given you, in each of these letters, they've given you a couple sentences. They want you to revise them by creating a single sentence and combining all these sentences into one sentence, essentially, using relative clauses or content clauses, or you may add prepositions but no coordinators. You can keep any existing coordinators. In other words, don't say, sentence X and sentence Y, right? Instead of using one of the fanboys, actually revise these to embed these sentences within each other using clauses, okay? And using subordinating clauses or relative clauses. And that is this file. The next file is about identifying independent clauses and dependent clauses. You may want to do this one first, just because it sets you up for the next one. So in each of these sentences, you're going to underline the independent clause once. So where's the main clause of the sentence? And underline or italicize or bold, I don't care, The dependent clauses. So first you have to identify, where are your dependent clauses, and then which ones are dependent, which ones are independent. If you have dependent clauses, tell me how they're functioning. Is it a subordinate clause, a relative clause, a noun clause? If it's a noun clause, identify how the clause is functioning. So remember, noun clauses can function as subjects or objects, and which kind of object it is. In this case, we have, in the example, you have the noun clause that I would help with the yard work that is functioning as the direct object in this sentence. I said it. Remember, you can always substitute a noun clause with a pronoun, it. Okay. So that's all you have to do for these sentences. Fairly straightforward. And then you upload these to Moodle and then go back and read the significance and next at the end. And next week will be our last week.